There's a lot of Apple devices which I tend to talk about, which are like iPods and iPhones, but there's one device which I haven't talked about yet, which I would love to be able to talk about, and you can't see it. Fine, I'm just gonna show it. This is the first gen iPad. Boy, gotta go and turn on the brightness. This is the first gen iPad. Now, even though I'm not really a guy who tends to use a lot of iPads, I've got this one that's an iPad Air first gen from 2013, but I do have a first gen iPad here, and I want to talk about it since I actually wanted to make a video on this for a while. I wanted to make a video on the first gen iPad. The first gen iPad was a massive deal, but it also really wasn't. Because when the original iPad came out in 2010, or it was introduced actually, Steve Jobs had the opportunity to be able to say that he wanted a device in the middle between an iPhone and a laptop, which this guy came in and basically took that spot, and I'm so sorry that the brightness is way too bright. This is the lowest I can get. The first gen iPad really did shock a lot of people because a lot of people didn't really see a point to buy an iPad. They just kind of saw that it was a bigger iPhone. Although a lot of people did care about the iPhone, which this is an iPhone 4 from 2010, this was a massive iPhone. Although it was a massive iPhone in a good sense because you could do a lot more. Steve Jobs basically demonstrated what things you could do, which, I mean, this guy could do. This guy made it a lot easier, like reading PDAs or looking at the local newspaper in the morning. Or now to quickly talk about the tech specs in this guy, the first thing which I want to bring up is the new processor that was in it at the time, which is the A4 chip, the very first chip that Apple ever produced in a portable, like, iOS device. Now, even though the iPhone 4 did have the A4 chip in it as well, it wasn't the very first device. This was. The iPad was the very first device to have the A4 chip in it, and this actually got it second place. I mean, yeah, the iPhone 4 had the A4 chip in it and also had a Retina display. This didn't have a Retina display, unfortunately, but this did have the A4 chip in it, which was clocked at this amount of gigahertz, 256 gigabytes of RAM, 16 gigabytes at the base model, along with 64 gigabytes of storage at the highest end model. Now, yes, the iPhone 4 did take advantage of the A4 chip, but this thing was really underpowered at the time. It only had 256 megabytes of RAM in it at the time, which really gave it that kind of limit. At the time, it was gonna be fine, but unfortunately, like, this really had an issue. Now, this thing actually ran really good. The iPhone 4 really did run good. The iPad still had a bit of lag, but also another thing which also really underpowered this guy is the OS which it ran. Because the OS that it originally ran was originally iOS 3.2, but it only went up to iOS 5.1.1, which really is a really odd place to stop at. And this could have run iOS 6, by the way. This could have run iOS 6, maybe run iOS 7 with a few issues, but this got stuck at iOS 5.1.1. This is the 64 gigabyte model too. This is the highest end model that they had at the time. The iPhone 4 got iOS 7. This thing only got 5.1.1. This got 2 full generations before this guy even got up to the last version. This got 2 full generations ahead. Meanwhile, this guy was stuck in 2012. Now, yeah, I'm gonna quickly get into basically how the usage was. This actually would have been a really nice iPad at the time. I don't really use it because I don't really have that much of a use of it anyway because, well, there's a couple of issues with it, which I will have to get into in a second. But this thing really did have a lot of uses at the time. It really was a good PDF reader. It was very good when it came down to what it was told or what it was basically advertised to do. It was good. It was really good. This guy was amazing at the time, although a lot of people didn't want to just read everything on their phones. Although the biggest thing which really made this iPad the way it was is just the idea of it being a tablet. Tablets at the time really weren't that successful. They weren't. You know, I know Apple had the Newton and a lot of other companies made tablets like Samsung and that stuff, but they didn't really make a commercially successful iPad, at least not in that sense. This was the first commercially successful tablet at the time. It was the first commercially successful. It really did blow up, and this, because it was an Apple product, by the way, because it was an Apple product, a lot of people love Apple products, this really did take off, and the iPad became absolutely massive. Like multiple different generations. Like this is an iPad Air from 2013. I've got this iPad a couple months ago, and you can kind of see the similarities. And I can't hold this correctly like that, but I mean, you can see the similarities. This is basically the same height, and this is basically, wow. I mean, the iPad was a massive deal at the time. Massive deal, without a doubt. It was a massive deal because this really did have that like touch of being able to be that perfect seasoning of basically between a computer and a phone. Like this was the very first touchscreen where you can actually just like not have to worry, and then just, this was good. And you can see why this really did like have massive success. The iPhone was massively successful. Meanwhile, this guy really did give it that like generation of new products, and I mean, this thing really did boost that tablet narrative, like really did. This thing really did. Although it's getting to a point to where tablets are looking kind of outdated because of VR headsets. Now, yes, this did have competition, although the competition wasn't quite as good as iPhone's competitors. There was Android and Windows. I think the Surface Pro honestly is a good thing, but I mean, it didn't really compare against the iPad. The iPad had a really nice experience, especially when the iPads were getting a lot smaller, and they were actually becoming a lot better too. They were just becoming a lot better to the point to where literally iPads were becoming that secondary device that you can use. And it was a good thing. Although the sad thing is that because the competitors couldn't really keep up with this guy, a lot of people say that Android tablets failed. Which, I mean, they're still around, but I mean, it's hard to be able to fit with that. So yeah, the first gen iPad, it's a really nice little device. It's really outdated, although I think the sad bit is that the first gen iPad could have gone up a lot higher, but I think it's been kept at a good spot to be like basically that museum piece. It's really nice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really wanted to talk about this guy for a long time. Comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you guys later when I do a video on modding my Xbox One. Bye.